YouTube, this is Matto here again. Today I decided to change the spark plugs in my, well, not change but check the spark plugs in my Ford Fairlane. This is a G220 model Australian car, but it has the infamous V8 from Ford, 5.4 litre Triton, 220 kilowatt with the 3V heads. Now these things have been known that the spark plugs get stuck after a while, so I thought, well, it's done about 25,000 miles or 45 to 55,000 kilometres since it was the spark plugs got changed. So I thought, well, I'm going to pull this apart and get the spark plugs changed. Now the first thing, of course, you've got to remove your intake manifold screws on the top, the cover on your intake manifold. Take that all off and take your intake pipe off your filters, so we get rid of anything. If you have injected gas like I do, I've had to unbolt that just to get them out the way. Now I'm going to get you a clear vision here of how deep these things are. As you can see, I've already taken them out and they're pretty deep in, so you're going to need a 9/16 a spark plug removal socket, and this one actually came from the United States directly, and from the United States they only cost about $3, but then you're paying postage. Now one big tip before you go and take these spark plugs out, as you can see here I've got some hose. Now the hose, I think it's a 19mm diameter. Let's check that out. So before you take the spark plugs out, and there's no writing on there, but it's around the 19mm diameter, stick it into the end of a vacuum cleaner, turn it on, and just suck all the dirt out from inside the hole. And that way, and suck around it, do the same on all 8 cylinders and make sure you get all that dust and dirt out of that hole. And once that is done, you can then proceed in removing the spark plugs. Now, because I've taken these spark plugs out early, they came out pretty easy, no trouble at all. My recommendation for an engine like this is never leave it go past the 25,000 mile mark, no matter what. These, you have no reason on this car not to pull them out every 25,000 miles. Make sure that every time you put in spark plugs you put a lot of anti-seize, and I'm going to show you one of these plugs. So here's one here. As you can see, they came out pretty clean, but unfortunately very worn because they put the wrong type in. But put some anti-seize from around where the end of my thumb is, right up your thread, up to the end right there. That way, every time you go to remove them, no matter if it's 6 months down the track or 5 years down the track, they'll come out really easy. If you've never changed the spark plugs in your engine before, crack them an 1/8 and just feel with your fingers. Take your breaker bar off. Take one of your breaker bars off. I had to use a fairly long pole on this because Ford forgot to put any anti-seize on my spark plugs. Fantastic. Take it off and just wind it by hand. If it's easy by finger, you know that the spark plugs aren't stuck. If you get a jam on any one of them, if you can't take it out with your hands, with your hand strength, do not, and I repeat, do not try and remove it with a breaker bar or any type of ratchet, because this bit in between there gets broken off and basically that part on the top gets stuck in your head. And you don't want that, because then you'll need the Ford removal tool or a guy to come out and service your heads, and if they drop in the motor you'll never get them out without taking the heads off the car. So if that does happen to you, get a can of WD-40 RP7 inox, any kind of rust dispersant or oil, even just some plain oil, and spray a little bit in each cylinder. Don't put too much in, otherwise you'll end up locking up the motor with oil and you won't be able to start it or turn it over. So you do that, leave it sit for an hour or 2 hours, and then come back and try again. But this time you just slowly ease it out and a bit back in, out and a bit back in. Do not sit there and try twisting it to the left all the time, otherwise you're not snapping them. And if you still can't get it out, my recommendation is bring it to a professional. Anyway, I'm going to go out now and get some new spark plugs, but before I do that I'm going to show you what Ford did to my car, because this is kind of ridiculous. As you can see here, there's the spark plugs, all 8 of them sitting there. As you can see, normal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the same. And then 7 and 8 were these extra long depth, hotter spark plugs. Oops, sorry. As you can see there's a big difference between those ones and those ones. So these were in turn the wrong type of spark plug. So I'm going to have to go to the store now and find out exactly which one, or which one they look like. And I'm actually putting in 1 stage colder because this engine runs LPG, or propane as the Americans know it. So we will go over to the store and get some. Over and out. G'day, I'm back from the auto parts store. I went to a few. Went past Repco in Australia, went past Autobarn and Burson's, and called up a couple of others like Super Cheap Auto. I came up there with the actual old plugs and told them what car it was out of and told them what other cars this fits, and they said no, we don't have that. Eventually I found that Ford Australia is probably the cheapest place to get these plugs at about $21 each. So here we go, we've got 8 Motorcraft Ford made spark plugs. So we're going to pull one out up here, get at least 2 out. There's 2. So it's a bit hard to open with your fingers. As you can see, there's 1 plug. These are the 14s, the longer versions of the ones that I pulled out of the car. They said that the shorter ones, I don't know what they come from, and that would have been way too cold for my engine. So I've had 6 spark plugs of the wrong type completely. I wanted to get one set colder, but in Australia they don't sell them anywhere, and the only place I can get them is off eBay, and it will take weeks and weeks to get the spark plugs. So look, it's not going to be too much of an issue running 1 set warmer. It's just that the spark plug life won't be as good. I'd say about half the life in one of these motors. So as you can see here, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some thread Loctite 771 lubricant or anti-seize on the threads of these. Now you don't just want the threads. The parts that break off in these motors are down this end here, but I've been told that nowadays they've got this lip on there which makes these spark plugs a lot stronger than the old versions, but still I wouldn't trust them, especially if you're going to leave them in the engine for so long. I would still recommend pulling these spark plugs out every 50,000 or every 25,000 miles, 50,000 Ks, just to check on their condition, and put some more, clean them up, put some more anti-seize, and away you go. Anyway, I'm going to coat this one up. So as you can see there, I've coated that one right up. Just make sure that you're careful not to get any inside that ceramic part of the spark plug, otherwise you'll get misfiring. So give it a good generous coat. You can either do this with a small brush, an old toothbrush even, or just by fingers if you've got some good hand soap in your garage. Anyway, we'll put this one in. And I'll do one of the easier cylinders first, which is number 1. I believe it's number 1. I don't know much about these V8s. It's been a new thing working on a V8. I'm used to 6s and 4 cylinders and V6s, but these 8s, I believe this is number 1. Correct me if I'm wrong. Someone leave me a comment if I'm an idiot and I got that wrong. So now we've tightened that by hand. Now, if it doesn't want to tighten up nicely by hand, I'd advise pull the spark plug out and have a look at your threads. Just make sure you don't cross thread any of this. Now, as you can see, these are a different type of spark plug of the Patrol. You don't need to turn these things in up to 3/4 of a turn, just 1/8. So we're going to give that an 1/8 of the turn. Oops. 2 hands, 1/8. just until it's tight. You only need 37 to 40 Newton meters on these, not much more, so you're only getting an 8 like that, and that's it. So we'll come back here and do another spark plug. Okay, so this is the last spark plug that's going in. Again, we pick up our ratchet. You don't need a very long one. As you can see, this is only a 6 or 7 inch long ratchet, and I've got 2 of them. There's my king chrome. This is just a Repco general branded spark plug. Now you're going to get a couple here that are a bit hard to access. Just be smart about it. You might have to take your extensions off and run a shorter one to get, like in here, as you can see. It's a little bit difficult, but make sure that this thread is always sitting straight, for those who haven't done one of the spark plugs before. And there we go, that's finger tight now. And we just get our ratchet back onto it and give it I'll just do that nicely and a bit better. That's it. You don't need to crank them over until your hand breaks, just nice and tight. Not too tight, otherwise you'll never get them out still with the anti-seize. So that's all 8 cylinders done. So I'm going to put the coil packs back on now. The thing I recommend with coil packs is on each side, when you take out the first coil plug, put it on the right, work your way back, and same thing here. And then what you do is when you put them back together, you can either go from the right hand side, right to right, or left to left, and put them back in where they came from. That way you don't get them mixed, everything fits in case there's anything different. Now, so yeah, I'll put them back in and we shall fire this thing up. As you're putting these in, it's always advisable to check the rubber around the spring or around the wire spring there. Have a look at the coil pack itself, to make sure there's no cracks or breaks in there. And I'm going to put this one in now. It's always advisable too that you disconnect your negative power, but I'm lazy, so don't follow my advice on that. Anyway, you can see when I put these in, I just use a screwdriver attachment on my socket, and I use a 7mm socket to do them up, just to feel for any cross threading. And then once it's done up like that, we just get our ratchet on top and give it about a quarter turn. That's it, not even that, just until they nip up. They don't need to be super tight. And always do not forget to clip your plugs back on to the top of the coil. They do move around a little bit, so that's not too much of a worry. As you can see before, cleaning out the spark plug holes has made a big difference on how clean it is inside there. So again, I'll check for cracks, wear, if that is burnt on the end, but these all look in a good condition to me, so I'm just putting them straight back in. And also I had no problems with misfiring, you know, intermittent misfiring, etc., so everything should be okay. As you can see, some of these get a bit tricky to put back in because you got pipes in the way, etc., etc. Some people take everything apart. I don't find that necessary. As long as you can get access to 90% of it, it's able to be put back on. So again, we get our normal screwdriver head. And we put that one back on there like so. And grab the other bit, click it in the top. You can also use just a standard extension, but that's it. Though you don't want more than that. Just a quarter turn, not even that, an 8 to a quarter, as long as it doesn't strip the threads. and now I've got the other side to do. And then what we'll do is we'll screw back on the gas injectors, which most of these models don't have, back onto the rails there. As you can see, Ford did a pretty nasty job on converting this over to propane or gas. Look how many holes they made, how rough their cutting is on that one. It was a shocking job that I had to fix up and kind of patch up their work. They had the original plastic cover on here, which was hacked up, and really they could have put the injectors, you know, mounted them in behind the motor there or underneath the covers if they were smart enough, and kept this all clear. Anyway, I'll continue. Alright, so this is the finished job here. Well, nearly. I just have to put the air filter pipe back on, which is basically below this car, which is a modified version of the Ford air filters and air pipes. It's actually about 20% diameter larger, so that's the full 4 inches right up to the airflow air box, and I've cut a big hole in the front of the air box as well to let more airflow in up the bottom there underneath. So let's give it a whirl, will we? You know this is a V8. Birds. Turn the air conditioning off. Might help it. Alright. You see how she revs up? You just slowly rev it up, just to make sure that everything's good. And see if it's fixed up my smoking issue. A lot less unburnt fuel. It's still a fairly cold motor. Shouldn't be revving it up that hard, but you know me, I'm the rev head. There we go. Purrs like a kitten. Anyway, let's take this thing out for a drive after I fit this thing back off. I'm not going to take it out for driving without having some filtered air. Alright, catch you soon. So here we are, test drive. These are only slow roads, so I can't accelerate very hard up these roads, otherwise the cops might be sitting, you know, quarter of a mile down the road and they'll come and get me. So what I'm going to attempt to do is get out into a main highway and give it a bit of a burst. I mean, we can a little bit down here, but it is a bit risky, so. Plus it's a school zone, so we've got to take some responsibility in, you know, test driving cars, that we don't go up to 100 kilometres or 60 miles an hour just in a in a small street like this, because you know someone could get horribly injured or even killed. So anyone out there who wants to test drive their cars, please take it to a main road or a main highway before you try and doing 60 mile an hour or 100 kilometres an hour, and just drive safely. So we're going to take this up to a main road and I'll come back to you. Oh, I've had to go onto a different camera because my other one ran out. So let's speed up a bit, just a little bit. Go around this roundabout here and come back. Car seems to be running pretty good. Very smooth. No issues. So coming rolling around here pretty slow. Have a look at the roadworks, would you? And of course you come up behind some idiot that does about 20 miles under the speed limit for no reason at all. The posted speed's 50 and this guy's doing about 45 mile an hour.